Hello and welcome back to season 5 of Elo Hell's Get Good tournament, where at this moment this evening we get to watch the intermediate division, the game between the Chonky Boys and the Mosstroopers. I will still be your play-by-play caster, Belly, and still with me is the amazing color caster, Man of Class. And Class, we already had a very nice series to go. Now going back into the
Yes.
intermediate division. Um, well, hopefully, naturally, we're gonna get even more great Overwatch to watch.
That is always what we hope for. We're here to watch great Overwatch and to talk
Hmm.
about it, and then you're here to watch it. So, the combination of those things only works when there's a game to actually watch. And since we have one, we can consider we can continue as planned. We can actually, we don't have to try and figure something else out. No, we got a game, Chunky Boys, Moss Troopers, and once again, we don't have an amazing amount of information on these teams. We do know that the Moss Troopers have lost essentially every single game but one, and the one they won is I think just because they had a bye. So they're very much down in the score line, and I have
Yeah.
no idea where the Chunky Boys are listing at the moment. So I don't know what this matchup is going to be like. Once again, if they're both on that much of a loss record, could very well be that we have a close game. But if Chunky Boys is, for instance, like a 3-1 or 3-2 or something like that, Moss Troopers is looking to be in trouble here.
It's definitely the case. Moss Troopers indeed not looking too hefty, according to the information we've gotten. So this may or may not be a one-sided affair. Naturally, we're hoping it will not be. Nepal gonna be the first map, is the one we've seen before as well in the previous series. And I
Yeah.
mean, we've already mentioned how very varied this map can be, Classy.
Yeah, it just has very different, geometry on all 3 points. Where if you start on Sanctum, you have to watch out for the environmentals. The entry points are very choky, but then you go to Village, in which the entry points might be a little bit more choked up or a little bit more opened up, but they're further away from the objective, so it's harder to get into that. And then the objective itself is very closed off. And then you go to Shrine, which is just open. There's no place to hide really, and that makes it so much harder to deal with the slight high ground you have because the point is slightly elevated and the ground's next to it, but then your approach is on the lower ground. So yeah, you have to deal with that sort of mobility issue where do you run something that can walk up the stairs and just rush the enemy team, or do you try and flank around it with DPS, for instance? So it's really up to which points we get, which type of team gets the upper hand. And looking at the limited information we have from Moss Troopers, they do really like to play the Reinhardt and the Ana, which could indicate that they're more of a brawly rush type of team. And they could potentially come out with an Echo as well from realistic. So then they still have a little bit of flank potential, what we've seen happening a lot lately in Overwatch. Chunky Boys, we just heard are 1-4, which is relatively similar to the Moss Trooper scoreline,
Yeah.
which is always nice. But that does mean that they both are looking to get some more wins on the board. So whoever doesn't get this win is going to be really just out of it for the rest of the season. I feel like. But Moss Troopers, Chunky Boys, I think they're ready, and I'm also just ready to get into this. So let's hope we see the game soon.
I do indeed hope that we can get into this soon, but indeed the win-loss record isn't really the greatest, but it does mean that these teams are very equal in standing. So this it can
Yeah.
still be a very close game between these two teams. And you mentioned the Echo. Like I'm gonna say that I would like that Echo to come on out. I really like this hero in a
Oh yeah.
competitive setting because it really puts teams on their toes of like what to expect.
Yeah, we just saw Pharmacy doing a lot of work in the last series, and I think an Echo can put out that same amount of threat, but maybe even more. Because Echo can just come from more unexpected angles in a faster fashion and do more focused burst damage on one and even multiple targets at the same time. Whereas Farah still relies on more of a poke type of damage, more of style, and always sort of has to have that mercy with her. Echo just feels more independent and more like an air assassin than Farah does a lot of the time.
Absolutely. As we load into Nepal Village as our initial map, we're going to be waiting out what these teams are actually going to be picking, whether we'll be seeing the Echo come on out. It's looking like it's not an initial choice at the very least. From what I'm seeing, it's going to be an attempt to just kind of bunker into the village capture point.
And that's not a weird strategy. That's really what Village leads itself to. It's a closed off objective. If you get there first and you're able to set up with something like a Symmetra May, which both teams are showing right now, you can really keep holding that with a double barrier comp and just enough sustain from a Brigitte and a Moira, or a Baptiste and a Brigitte, depending on what you go with. But there's some slight variations. Of course, Orisa versus Sigma, and then the Moira versus the Baptiste. So whoever wins this first fight is going to be in a great position to close out this map very early on.
Mosstroopers has swapped off the Symmetra, only using that teleport ability to get out of spawn faster. However, Chonky Boys has won the race and will be able to set up on point first. Wolfman dropping low, dropping dead. The chunk damage from Apples too much, and Mosstroopers does not care that Chonky Boys made it to point first. They will set their ground, they will capture that point first and get their bunker going.
I can really see that Moira sustain is just so different from something like a Baptiste. You do immediately have to also see that X9N has to go over to that Ashe instead of the Symmetra, because Symmetra, while she's really good at holding a spot, it's still very hard to sort of get in there and attack with her. She's not as as long range adapt and as spam adapt and as sustainable in a fight as a lot of other DPS are. The consistent damage really starts coming while you are able to hold on with the turrets and get your beam charge up.
Gonna be a quick swap off of indeed to the Ashe. It gets some dynamite damage in the wall on the middle of the point, but the wall from the Mosstroopers is gonna make sure that Wolfman cannot get out or any reinforcements from the team. And once again, with two quick picks, the Chonky Boys are not really managing to get a hold so far. And Mosstroopers looking very confident in their hold so far.
Yeah, and that's nice to see. Both these teams, their scores might be down in the ditches a little bit when it comes to the overall season, but it's nice to see that there's still this ready to go to a fight and to take it to the other team, and they have the ability to hold on with this type of ult bank for Mosstroopers. It's going to make it so hard to get in here for the Chonky Boys.
It's an extremely difficult bunker to get into, and the May is just terrifying. To have two more swaps, Reaper and McCree this time for Chonky Boys. Wolfman does have the Shatter, tries to pull that one out as the Death Blossom comes in, denying so much of that potential follow-up. At 3 kills, 4 apples, and the Mosstroopers going up to that last fight territory. 86% has been passed. Chonky Boys are gonna have to get some miracle out to even get Village back.
Yeah, they still have to walk into a blizzard and a supercharger. They're gonna try and get in touch with the ball of Coach, but will that actually make it in time? That's the question. They will be able to touch, but Phoenix already down.
Phoenix down, Halcyon down, and with that, that's going to be the rest of Chonky Boys also down. And Mosstroopers just looking good for this initial village captured, this initial village point. Overtime Witness will start burning down, and that will be 1 round in favor of Mosstroopers here on Nepal.
Yeah, Mosstroopers, just after they got control of that point first, which is sort of what we're looking at, then they just win. It's not necessarily always the case. Village is definitely a point where you can go back and forth, but holding onto that objective becomes so easy once you go in there with that May Reinhardt composition, and you're just able to wall and smack your way to victory. And now that we're going to Shrine, it's sort of like the opposite thing, where even if you're on the objective, you're not even sure whether you're going to be able to hold on to it because it's so open. There's so many angles you can take. And this is where we can potentially see some more Pharah and Echo play come in here, which is what both teams are queuing up right now. So Pharmacy Ashe versus an Echo and a McCree. Tank line, similar, almost similar, but it will be Sigmas versus an Orisa or a Reinhardt. And the supports are completely different. Of course, that Mercy from Goose and Halcyon on that Baptiste, whereas Hashtash and Garen will go for the Ana Lucio, which will give them more brawl potential with the speed boost, but they still need to be able to heal enough as well, of course, which Hashtash has to hit those shots.
Veneri already getting that focus beam damage on out, taking Goose out of the equation, so Phoenix is not really going to be able to do as much damage as the Pharah would want to, but as I say that, Phoenix is very happy to prove me wrong, takes out Apples. And Chonky Boys is kind of moving forward. Zusa has taken out Phoenix, however, the damage seems to have done. Goose is back right at the ready to get the res on through. As it's looking rough for Hashdash with that dynamite and fire, Mosstroopers, while having grabbed this point first, the Farah and the rest of the Chonky boys pumping out all the damage is too much for this red team to deal with, so it seems early on.
Yeah, Chonky boys will eventually cut this point over. We'll gone at about 30% at that point. They do have to be careful though. Phoenix has been caught out almost twice already. We'll be able to stay alive through that McCree fire from apples, but it's tough sometimes to play fire against comps like this because you have to get somehow behind them, behind those double barriers in order to do damage. And it was looking a bit difficult for them to do that at times. That being said though, ultimates are in a good spot. And they almost have a Bob ready, they have the Barrage, will be close to a Valkyrie, already have an Amplification Matrix. But there are some tools to work on the other side as well, and I'm particularly looking towards that Shatter, maybe even the Duplicate.
We're gonna see an early amplification matrix. Phoenix is gonna go into the back line, but nothing really else seems to be needed as the players from Mosstroopers are dropping like flies. And the Mosstroopers indeed once again having to regroup and having to figure out how to deal with what Chonky Boys has got, which at this point is a fair bit of ultimates.
I thought it was a beautiful threading the needle there from Phoenix, just get that damage boosted rocket straight on the Ana, direct hit, even from not a sky position, more of a ground position there. But both teams are coming up with quite a few ultimates. But that early kill on Veneri might just change everything here.
Well, Phoenix once again 2 picks here. Mosstroopers really not getting into this point. Azusa will be the next to drop. Hashdash is just going to go for the force reset. As the Mosstroopers are realizing that they don't have that many fights anymore left here on this round.
And we're getting into a sort of a classic situations which you often see when teams play Pharmacy on the less high tier, so to speak. This is around Diamond, if I'm not mistaken. So what you often can see is that the pathing and the way that teams move around together is just not as clean, and that's why Faras get so much value, and as Dynamites as well.
Nano Reinhardt comes on through as Bob as well runs onto the point from the Chonky boys. As Wolf map drops down, even the shield from Sigma was not enough, breaks very rapidly. So enough damage comes in through for the Chonky boys to keep this fight going. Veneri still in the back. This has taken out Goose with that focus beam, takes out the second one. Will the duplication come in? That will be a duplication coming on through indeed. Chains into the Sigma. It's going to be a very quick ultimate charge, but will it be quick enough to really get that Gravitic Flux on going to try and turn this one around? 95 on the board, a lot of health losing. This will beat Veneri back into Echo form. But it's long enough to keep that contest going. It is 99% on the board for the Chonky boys. So this is going to be a fight that Mosstroopers needs to win as the Immortality Field goes down. Amplification Matrix drops as well. But Mosstroopers have dropped the enemy team. As Halcyon is just trying to use that Amplification Matrix, jumps over the enemy. The Mosstroopers will manage to flip this point and start gaining the percentage back.
Coach getting staggered out as well. They don't want to kill them in time. The charge out. Will they go off the map with that? No, there's just a charge kill. And now we're almost 50% up already for the Mosstroopers. The Chonky boys are doing a great job holding on to that, but then the point flipped and they never really gave up the fight quickly enough. They thought they could still win it. Now they're gonna come in here. They will have an ultimate advantage once again. Right now, that is, but there will be quite a few ultimates online very soon for Mosstroopers. So that ultimate advantage won't last long. They will have that Bob and Gravitic Flux combo, though. You know, the Gravitic Bob or whatever we... I don't know. Where did we end? The Robotic Flux or Robotic Flux?
Sure. I like the Robotic Flux. I think that sounds very... It sounds nice. It's got the same kind of rhythm to it. However, Yaren will have that sound barrier right at the ready to keep everyone alive should that Robotic Flux come on through. As Phoenix drops as well a whole bunch of damage. Not though, drops the Wolf Mask, so you're going to be losing out on your main time. But Veneri is just right and ready to go into the back line. And does have the duplicate, so can just kind of fight this one out. Tries to get out with 13 HP. He's gonna use the duplicate to just kind of stay alive. I still have 2 tanks right at the ready, as Not is still trying to get a back. Soundbear to keep everyone alive. Gravitic Flux comes on through as well. As the Shatter comes in, doesn't land on anyone, but forces out enough for the side of Chonky boys that Mosstroopers can keep on pushing forward as the Gravitic Flux comes in as well. Zusa gets 2 more for the red team, and the Mosstroopers are looking to clean this one out. Overtime Wick burns down, and that will be Mosstroopers still pulling it back after a rough start of the second map. but they will get the victory here on Nepal.
It's looking great to be a nice series here, but so far Mosstroopers do have a little bit of an edge here. It was looking great for a long while for the Chunky Boys, but somehow they weren't able to capitalize and push it through to the end. Otherwise, this might have been a 3rd point type of deal where we went to Sanctum and then anything can really happen. That being said, though, Mosstroopers look very well at just being able to clutch back fights. They're able to stay calm, stay in their own head, and use their ultimates and their resources effectively in order to come back from a deficit. Whereas Chunky Boys looking a little bit less aware of ult economy like that, a little bit less aware of how they rotate and how they deal with a situation like that. So going into these next maps, if you're going to see more of that organized play come out from Mosstroopers, it's going to be hard for the Chunky Boys to actually fight back against that if they can't match that level of team play and that level of strategic coherence.
As we will be moving into soon moving into the next map, which will be Rialto. Teams will
Yeah.
also swap sides, so Mosstroopers will be defending first. Keep that in mind. Mosstroopers blue, Chunky Boys in red. Did Rialto coming back on through? We've already seen a Farah coming in for Nepal earlier. We've seen the Echo for Veneri. Would you expect that one to come on out more as we go into these very open maps?
Potentially. I mean, there's definitely a potential for that to happen here. Obviously we did see the Echo versus Farah matchup, which was very nice. I'm hoping both teams will opt more for the Ashe than for McCree or Widowmaker, because of course Ashe just does more at this point. Ashe has gotten to a place in the meta, and the meta has allowed for her to get into that place where she kind of does both the jobs of Widowmaker and McCree, and then also has the dynamite. So it really combines the 3 snipers, what they normally do, the 3 hit scan and 2 hit scan and Hanzo, really. That she has the burst, she has the damage, she has the range, and she has mobility even on a lower cooldown than Widowmaker in order to get away from things and to boot people away from her to stop their momentum. That all those different factors combined just make her a really good pick right now. And if you try to play McCree in that same situation, you will more often than not get as much damage output, not get as much value, and not get as much utility for your team that you really want to get from a DPS like that.
I mean, it would specifically be indeed that range, especially also after the stun nerfs that came on through and the
Yeah.
essentially melee range that you've got on the flashbang. If
Yeah.
everyone's just playing behind double shields, then definitely you're really not going to be finding the value on McCree if you have to go through 2 shields to even be able to get the flashbang off, where there will be 2 tanks right at the ready to pump lead into your skull. Indeed, you're very right in saying that the Ashe with a long range, mid range, and even short range, and then a dynamite that can do a whopping 175 damage in total. Like, that is mental that you can pump that out so rapidly. And indeed, getting a lot of value for either of the teams should they choose to play it. And I would not be upset to see more of Ashe coming on through because she's not really
No.
seen that much play in organized environments for such a long time, even though she hasn't
She's
had
back though.
she's had a
She's
few
finally
buffs,
there.
but nothing too major, honestly.
No, and it's again, it's mostly about how the meta's involved, right? So with the double barrier and then with
Hmm.
Echo coming in as well, which was a very big deal. Echo being way more mobile than Far in a lot of situations, so she's not as predictable for McCree to fight against. And a lot of these other things, like Bob has finally gotten a lot of value in a lot of these games. There's so much going on in the meta that just give Ash the opportunity to be in there, like Dive not being as strong. So you don't need as many of these disables, May falling off a bit more. There's just a lot of things lining up correctly for Ash to take that place in the meta. You do see X9N teasing it in spawn right now, but we're going to look at the defense first because obviously they're actually running out of spawn and setting up. And it does look like they're going to go for double barrier, double sniper, and double damage supports. So it's just a 2-2-2 double double double, and that's something I like to see. I like teams going for that full commit on something, and if they can deny the double barriers from denying them their sight lines as snipers, they can get a lot of value out of this, especially with that extra Discord Orb damage and the Baptiste helping out. It could be scary to fight against this.
I mean, no Ashe for either of these teams at the moment. Well, that would very much indeed be an interesting pick. As we get to see indeed the wonderful Widow bug here. No real scope in sight. As we've got some Widowmakers on side for both of these teams. Matt already having the Discord Orb on the Visa of the Chonky Boys. Payload's moving forward, though Phoenix is not, with a nice bullet to the head from Apples. A great headshot to deny that positioning. The Chonky Boys now looking a bit more rough, as the snipers of the Mosstroopers are just putting out too much damage for the Chonky Boys to really deal with.
Yeah, you gotta get those shields up. You gotta keep those shields angled at the right spots. And right now, not able to do so. Apple's winning the 1v1 with the Widowmaker as well. Like, it's almost a complete mirror. It's just Goose versus Hashtash. So it's healing versus really Discord Orbs. And so far, Discord Orbs seem to be winning out.
I mean, it is after the buff where the Discord Orbs amplify the damage by 30% again. That's a fair amount of damage that you can really pump out extra, especially if you've got these headshots coming out from a Hanzo or a Widowmaker. But Apples is gonna get the headshot onto X9. That will be once more a very nice Widow one for the Mosstroopers, and the defense is holding strong. If you lose out on that damage, it's gonna force that X9 to go off to a different pick, grabbing that Ashe back up.
Yeah, so far the Amplification Matrix just forcing them into this hotel position, which they can just flank around with. You see the Sigma going for the off angle. Sousa been playing a Senny-like Sigma, as we call it. The Senny flank Sigma is a staple in EU contenders at this point. Apples does finally get taken out. They were saying how you like my Apples, and the next time, so I have better Apples, it seems, for now. We do see that swap to the Ashe, though, so extra damage coming out, and can still fight a Widow one-on-one most of the time. Phoenix and X9 getting the kills, and that is a lot of damage you have to fight against now.
Even Azusa puts out the Gravitic Flux to try and get something done, try and get the Chonky Boys to pull back. They do not care about all the damage coming on through. They finally managed to clean up and keep this payload moving forward, seemingly having unlocked the key to what can break the bunker of Mosstroopers up.
It does seem like they're going to be able to contest again. I think they have the room for it, but they need to make the decisive move to do so. And they do finally go there with the Halt Accretion as well. The shields are ready. And it looks like they're going to be able to just hold in this choke, which is exactly what you want to do with this composition. But nice Dragon.
Dragon forcing out that immortality field and not dropping low enough, even with that field up. So Hashtash, a nice pick onto Goose, losing out on a whole bunch of healing and that nano boost that Venera can just kind of go into the backline, pick up a second. Coach doesn't manage to trade out for Yaren. And no, it is still the Ashe and the Dynamite from the Chonky Boys that make sure that this payload keeps on moving forward. Chonky Boys going on ahead to the second part.
It's looking great for them right now. Ever since they swapped over to that Ashe, they've been doing so much more damage. Those Dynamites, you see them regularly in the kill feed, that someone's been killed by Dynamite, or the burning effect from it. And if they started with an Ashe, they would have already been closing it on third maybe. But that's a good counter. Apples now also went to the Ashe, so they might be matched up a little bit better. So once again, we're almost in the mirror matchup. It's just that Ana versus Zenyatta still.
I mean, a whole lot of healing gives you a whole lot of sustain. The question whether that sustain will be all that you need. Apples once again dropping, and as Hashtash as well goes down. That is once again the defense of Mosstroopers not really finding a good foothold here on a Rialto point B.
Yeah, and in that Ana Zenyatta matchup, we said it before, it's all about, can you do the damage before they out-sustain you? And so far the answer is looking to be a resounding no most of the time. They're really relying on these picks to come through based off Hashtash's Discord Orbs, but they're not getting them in time, and now they don't even contest the objective in time, meaning that the second point given up. And if you're going to invest those ultimates and then still just run away, you're not really being very efficient with your ultimates, I'd say. Just go for that fight at that point.
I would definitely agree, and you're right, where the matchup between the Ashe and the Zenyatta is really indeed, like, at a certain point, you've got this flipping point where you need to get a kill, and if you cannot get through the shields, it's gonna be painful. Now the damage comes on through. Immortality Field is on the floor, but the dragon also picks up apples. You've got an equal trade, both Immortality Fields down, but no, Coaches is flanking, picking up another kill here. Amplification Matrix is on the floor, but Zusa with just 50 health left. It's not going to be long for this world. Still somehow alive from the kill feed is spotting, and Zusa seems to have made it back to a health pack.
Yeah, there's a Mega on that corner. They do finally catch them off. Nice headshot as well. That was just a normal shot, actually. It's a body shot. The Dragon has a defense coming out here. Phoenix is in a little bit of a precarious position. We'll get that kill in the apple somehow.
I mean, even if he died, that like I'm gonna say respect to that play. That was pretty good. That was pretty good. I liked it. Now the Mosstroopers actually with Zusa on the stagger pick is gonna have to swap over. Now we're gonna see that ultimate economy kind of flipping a bit.
Yeah, and after the Streets phase, we see no ultimates now left from the defense. Mosstroopers in a precarious position when it comes to their ultimates, and there will be quite a few online. So this could be a very tough fight to win, but if they manage to win this one and withstand the ultimate barrage that's coming their way, they might be in a good position to actually full hold this third point.
Chonky Boys are coming back here as the Graphitic Flux. As the Supercharge as well gets invested into their 2 Nano coming out as a third ultimate, and it is just kind of press Q to win for the Chonky Boys. They have picked up a few kills, but they've invested a whole bunch of ultimates into this fight, so this is one that they really need to clear out, but it does look like they will manage to. It's a minute and 20 seconds on the clock. The Chonky Boys managed to get the full push going.
I do like that expression as well, though. Just like press Q to win, and it was really one of those situations where all they had to do was press Q, not throw them like in the water, the ultimates, or completely away from the enemy team, and they were probably gonna win that. Because whereas there's teams that obviously can fight against the ultimate deficit like that and can like come back from something like that, I'm not expecting that to happen right here. Not because these teams are necessarily terrible or anything, but they require so much coordination and so much skill and so much awareness of everything around you in order to even defy like 1 or 2 ultimate combos. Imagine there being 4 ultimates online and you having no tools, just swapped up to a new comp, already on a back foot position. If you bring it back then, you might as well just be an Overwatch League team, right?
That, I mean, I would definitely agree. At this point, indeed, it is very much press your ultimate, aim it in the general direction of the enemy team, and you will most likely get the victory in that fight. And it is indeed what Chonky Boys did. Not to disregard their use of their ultimates, they did still play that very well. Indeed, too much.
They didn't all press Q at the same time. They did. They did. Stagger them out, but it's not rocket science anymore at that point. It's really not a miracle. We do see this attack coming out potentially with the Echo Sombra. It's going to be a dive. We saw this in the last series, working to a degree, but not working to get the victory on the map. So I'm curious to see whether they're going to be doing better here when you are the Mosstroopers. Because it's an interesting strategy, and I want to see more of it. I want to see why it can potentially work.
I mean, it'll be primarily about the EMP. There's not that many targets to really hack out, get a whole bunch of value. It's gonna be a hack onto Goose, however, so there's no sleep available, but you're gonna have to do a bit of damage. The charge for apples isn't that rapid just yet. Phoenix dropping low, dropping down as the dive comes on in. It does look like this dive is a bit more difficult for the Chonky Boys to deal with. Nice control of that focus beam to take Zan X9 out of the mid-air. Mosstroopers moving forward, seemingly having found some way to deal with the Chonky Boys.
And I think you could really see the communication going on there as well, where Vinery was just, I got the Hanzo to like half or low, and then they do the dive. Like they were waiting for that initial burst damage from the Echo to come in order for them to jump in and finish off that target. Exactly what happened there. And now they're in trouble here as well. Coach is hacked out, cannot do anything to help their team sustain, aside from do a little bit of damage. And they are trading out these kills a bit.
Swaps are coming on through. Phoenix also doing a fair chunk of damage. Only just swapped and already up to that ultimate at the ready. But Mosstroopers do manage to do enough damage to get that initial capture point with a whopping 5 minutes on the clock.
I like this Echo play so much. It's doing such a good job of just getting the kills where they need to and getting the damage in when they need to, even flanking in great positions. Look at that. There's those sticky bombs onto the Baptiste and immediately flying away like you can't catch me. It's great to see. Like Echo is it's such an interesting hero in a lot of ways. You feel like you cannot really deal with her. Um, but obviously you can. Like you don't have to play the Echo to deal with the Echo, but it's a lot harder than to deal with a Pharah because she can fight with her team so much better and independently so much better than a Pharah often can.
Absolutely, dive coming in once again, as is also a bomb here on the point, and that will be a double kill for Zusa. A huge opening for the offense of Mosstroopers, only needing that one ultimate. They have used the rally as well, however. But that being said, Mosstroopers kind of very quickly just moving on forward. However, this dive definitely going to be a bit more difficult here on last point.
Yeah, you're just gonna see how this time bank difference is all coming down to how well they defended on point A. Because the point A defense for the Mosstroopers was so much better than anything we've seen so far. And while it's going to be hard to push into the last point, they do have almost all their ultimates. And the EMP comes out after Transcendence. That's a beautiful play.
He indeed coming on out. Everyone hit. However, Chonky Boys is still alive. Immortality Field is right. The ready Chonky Boys pulling this one back. And that is indeed that robotic flux, as you have already mentioned it earlier on. And we're going to keep that one in because we can. Chonky Boys pulling it back. Mosstroopers starting to swap over some picks here to rethink their strategy.
Yeah, of course, it felt like they just had all their ultimates, so that's why they're staking on that dive and all those ultimates. But now they're going to go for a more indoor-friendly composition, because obviously that payload is going to be in a more enclosed, less skybox area. They will have to be aware of not being able to use as much mobility tools to really get around your enemy. You're rather just going head-on first. And that's when Reinhardt just comes into play. They do play Reinhardt D.Va versus this double barrier, which is still going to be difficult to rush. But as long as they're getting on top of them, this could still work out great.
As opening pick from Applesol to Halcyon, losing a whole chunk of damage and or healing and that immortality field. As 3 players from the Chonky Boys have already dropped. Phoenix just denying a bit of space with the high noon. Takes a few sticky bombs to the head. Though a nice little flashbang right click to take the D.Va mech out of commission. The Mosstroopers still doing too much damage, and that is a very hefty time
Can't
bang.
touch the cart, no.
Nobody was there. So
It
the
was
Mosstroopers will
interesting
get a
as
huge
well.
time bang.
It's interesting as well because Phoenix was just like doing work on the McCree, and while they were getting the shots up, you see the apple starting like popping up in the kill feed. So we were sort of like watching the wrong McCree, but it was almost confusing. They say, "Wait, but I see Phoenix like shooting things, but how does apples get into the kill feed?" It was really funny to see that the McCree matchup went that way in the end. So will there be any change ups from the defense now? Will Mosstroopers change anything up from what they did before? Will they just go with a double sniper again? I feel like they're not going to, because there's not really a reason to go double sniper here. I think if you just go Ash Echo or just Ash Far or something like that, they'll be fine. I don't think you need to go with a double sniper, especially if you're going to expect them to run double barrier. And going with this Hanzo Ash feels like a much more solid solution to that than a Widowmaker Hanzo. And I think that's also a reason why you potentially see Phoenix going over to this Junkrat. Just the barriers not existing is such a powerful tool. And you see it in the non-professional play happen quite a lot, where Junkrat just gets insane value from just being there. Not even like purposefully doing things, but just spamming out grenades and mines and laying traps down. It's such a detriment to double barrier compositions and a lot of compositions for that matter.
It's 120 damage per grenade that can just randomly hit any of your teammates. That's a lot of damage that you need to deal with, as X9 has already taken a chunk of damage from a Hanzo arrow. But the Chonky Boys moving on forward, as the Mosstroopers are going to rotate back to this early corner class.
A nice sonar arrow to keep checking that angle. Somehow got Halcyon do through that, through the room. Just get a headshot on that as Hanzo. Why not? Nice flick. You see the Junkrat jumping up to that high ground there. This is what I'm talking about, right? Goes for that duel. Just says, I'm going to spam nades at you. You have to hit me. Luckily, Vinery does hit that, though. So, attack still being stalled out for a bit more.
Attack very much being stalled out. Is less than 30 seconds left. The Chonky boys have got to pull this together to be able to keep this point going. It's not going to be an easy push here as Coach is still dropping low. Manages to get back to the team, however, but with that Discord Orb on the Sigma, it's a whole bunch of damage that the tank will be taking. Also receiving that Discord, so you're not going to be able to just freely roam wherever you want. Zusa on the high ground, Immortality Field from Halcyon is gone, and so is Wolfmad, once again losing one of those players. A huge anti, but that pulls out the Immortality Field. The damage is done. Chonky Boys is falling apart, and the Mosstroopers picking up all of the kills here with just Coach to go. That will be a quick cleanup. Nobody there to recontest. Overtime burns down, and the Mosstroopers will very convincingly hold this first point.
Mosstroopers doing such a good job of just abusing that Ashe and that Hanzo to the right way. Vinery is definitely hitting the shots that they needed to, and now they're going to their own attack. 3 minutes and I don't know if I'm like a lot. 3:42. They're unlikely not to get this far. I'm very much expecting this to just go the way of Mosstroopers, and the Mosstroopers have just been executing their compositions better. Like it's not even about different heroes. It's really about getting the value out of the Ashe, getting the value out of the Hanzo, rotating as a team with a double barrier. And even with that dive, you just saw that they knew who they're diving as a team. Like, they don't just jump in whenever. They do actually talk about what they're doing. And that's all you really need to do in a dive. Like, the communication is so paramount, and knowing exactly where you go and when you go there is vital. And it does seem like they just have a better grasp on things like that right now.
Well, I'm already having a bit of a question here. Chonky Boys under defense, opting to go for Phoenix on the Genji. As we mentioned earlier, the experimental changes have not come through yet, though it is indeed a nano blade that you can potentially pull out. But, I mean, I'm not fully sure about this, Classy.
I'm gonna go with comfort pick because the only other explanation I have is not really nice, so I won't do it. I'm definitely no, but I mean it could very well be a comfort pick, and if you're expecting to be able to just dash onto the Zenyatta and make their life miserable, it's a good disable to have together with that with a lot of other things you have on your disposal. They do get that first kill on the Vinery already, so not as easy to get through this time around.
Indeed, Nanto has already taken out Phoenix as well, and the attacker side will be able to get the reinforcements back just ever so slightly faster. Zusa dropping quite low also with the anti-nade, but is still very much pressuring the Ashe of Chonky Boys away from that forward fight. As Wolfmat just gets burned down by that focus beam from Veneri, and the rest of Chonky Boys is kind of taking a backline seat, trying to just deal with the Sombra and the off tank just in the backline. As also, unfortunately, from the Chonky Boys, one disconnect has happened. So that will be indeed one push for the Mosstroopers as the cleanup will be there. The Mosstroopers picking up their second point here in the series.
I was kind of wondering if we got to get a pause in, but I think we just this is like in the middle of a fight, and yeah,
yes,
it's
there is
fine.
indeed the rule set that those pauses only happen after the fight. So,
of course, yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? Otherwise, you can like strategize a whole thing with like micro plays in a certain fight while you're still having the fight.
Yeah.
So it's fine. I'm expecting this not to be a big deal, and we're just gonna go into the third map. But Mosstroopers just look to be a tiny bit better than Chonky Boys at this point. There's of course a lot of factors that go into something like that, like DPS doing a bit more damage, the tank's getting much more value. I think Zusa is 100% outplaying Coach all the time together with Nut. So yeah, it's Mosstroopers just being a bit better at this point, but there's a lot of chances for Chonky Boys to potentially turn this around.
Absolutely. So it's going to be King's Row next. But before we go into King's Row, we are once again going to take a short break. So get yourself one more drink, get yourself a snack. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. Hello and once again, welcome back to Season 5 of an Elo Hell's GitGud tournament. At this point, once again, the intermediate division where we are watching Chonky Boys versus the Mosstroopers. Mosstroopers are up 2-0, and this means that if we're going into King's Row as the next map, this will be match point for Mosstroopers to clean it out with a clean 3-0 victory. The Chonky Boys definitely not out just yet. I will still be your play-by-play caster, Belly, and with me is the amazing man of class as my, once again, partner in crime on the color casting seat. And Classy, it's been primarily a bit of a one-sided affair so far for the Mosstroopers. They've been playing very
It's
well.
it's
But
been one of those things, right? The
mhm,
bellicosity of Chunky Boys is not enough to just deter the Mosstroopers from just taking away. Um, Mosstroopers have been looking very good in the last two maps. Although we're going to King's Row, which is more of a map that the teams are 100% fully familiar with because it's called Scrims Row for a reason, of course.
every team
Um,
is familiar with it.
Everyone knows Kings Row, just how it works. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be an advantageous position. The way I always explain it is Kings Row, because everyone knows it, you won't be at a disadvantage, but you also really won't be at an advantage because it's just the same map that everyone always plays. So I'm curious to see what we're going to see here. I think certain picks that we've seen in the past few maps might not be as effective. So we'll see a lot of Reinhardt because that's what teams just always play here. But we might see some Zarya, might see more double barrier. It's just one of those things where it will depend on what the team's like. But Ashe is still going to be great. Zenyatta Baptiste could still work. Brigitte Baptiste can still work. Brigitte Ana can work. It's all about team preference in that case. And the DPS and the tanks are going to be the ones where they're likely going to make the difference, and the supports just have to make sure that they can keep up with everything.
Oh yeah, and I do want to also kind of mention because we've mentioned it in this earlier in the earlier series in the advanced division, where Overwatch is indeed the game of like being able to swap up and being able to change uh your compositions, being able to change your heroes. And from what we've seen so far, it seems that Mosstroopers is a bit more comfortable in changing their tactics, changing their composition, and changing their strategy. And that feels also like to give them a bit more of a better position to really take on anything the Chunky Boys might be throwing at them. The Kings Row, a very different map and a very different aesthetic than the other ones that we've had so far.
Yeah, and I'm just looking forward to seeing what these teams can bring us. I don't know why we got a pause. Maybe just testing the button. Of course, there
I feel like
was
it
no
might
pause on
be.
Rialto in the end. Yeah, then maybe they're just checking where they got the correct button now, and it wasn't happening on Rialto. But not a problem. Going into Kings Row, yeah. Once again, I just want to know what they're going to run out with on the defense. We do see the swap of sides happening once again, so it will be the Mosstroopers attacking first, and I mean, that means, at least it means that we're going to get a bit of a longer map rather than just a full hold potentially on A. Not saying that would have happened, but um, if they complete the map and then have to defend the completion of the map, that usually leads to a longer game. So more Overwatch, even if it is the last map. That's what I'm going for. That's what I like to see. So on the defense, we do see the McCree and the Ashe coming out. They're very much expecting either an Echo or a Pharah from Veneria, I think, at this point. And that's not unreasonable to expect, to be honest. They were really struggling to deal with that Echo. And double hit scan is a way to potentially deal with it. The only problem I see is that there's no Echo currently coming out from Vinery or Apples. So with this rush comp, McCree and Ashe might just be overrun.
I am very afraid indeed for the Chunky Boys. Getting that Lucio in there, getting this rush comp with a whole chunk of healing from Hashtash as well. Apples are going to try to get an early pick, then probably going to be swapping over. As the Mosstroopers are going to be waiting for the rest of the team to join up. A bit of rotation through Hotel, a nice flashbang early on, but that pulls out the Zarya bubble, and a nice wall to zone off Phoenix, so that was going to be a very early pickoff. Immortality Field will not be able to keep that DPS alive. A very aggressive charge from Not, who does not care at all, even with the Discord Orb on the Reinhardt. The Mosstroopers are just walking forward, and this rush comp is too much for the Chunky Boys to deal with.
Yeah, great point A take, honestly. Just they walk through hotel, get a good rotation. The wall play was nice, gets Phoenix out of the way straight away. And then the charge on Wolfmat, who was initially stunned. I think they were slapped by Hashtash, actually. And then the charge could come in, where they're already on like 3 bars of health. So, all in all, there was just good, consistent plays coming out one by one, capitalizing on mistakes and opportunities. And going into the street space, they will obviously have an ultimate advantage. They'll be able to push further forward, etc. But they do have to be careful not to lose players early, because those health bars were getting awfully low, to be honest.
Yes, absolutely. Phoenix almost having gotten walled off, manages to barely get back to the rest of the team. And now indeed the Chonky boys at a position to hold this defense, though not taking the very aggressive early archway a hold. That doesn't seem to matter, as not this kind that goes in just ever so slightly too aggressive, especially with the Discord Orb. Too much damage coming on through. The Bob is going to make sure that the Mosstroopers will just go for the regroup, having lost only 1 player, so not too bad.
Right now, they're in a good position ultimate-wise as well. They do have 4, almost 5 ultimates online. There will be 6 coming at them, though, so it's not in an advantageous position, and losing X9N early is a big loss.
Going for the flank shatter. Wolfmat does get punished for it. Now without your main tank, this is going to be a tough fight to hold. Coach will be the next to drop. And as the Chonky boys are just dropping one after the other, the Mosstroopers will be moving on forward, and as will the payload.
Yeah, and defensive Sky Noon was very nice, but it didn't quite get the yield because they had already lost X9N. They were already sort of on the back foot and backing off while those 2 ultimates went off. And they're really supposed to be used to win a fight. And if you're just using it to not lose a fight, you're playing it reactive like they were, it's not going to go well most of the time.
Here at a nice flank to just kind of pump out some damage, though X9 gets not at the fight, and as Phoenix grabs another one, this is going to be a difficult fight to hold. Veneri has dropped the Blizzard, but there is no follow-up available. And Nano also actually gets invested here. The Zeus is just going aggressive, takes themselves out as well with a right click. This one indeed be the Mosstroopers going back to spawn. Chonky boys still holding.
And I think this is a nice setup that they're having on the defense right now, where they're going to be able to have a Shatter, a Deadeye, close to Halcyon's. Oh, actually, they have Halcyon's application matrix already. And there's not really anything to work with on the side of Mosstroopers right now. Apples and Nut are the closest, and they're barely on 50%.
Mosstroopers coming back indeed with not that many tools at their disposal. This is a Shatter denied, however. Wolfmat goes down, though so does Yaren, as X9 is going to be able to just keep this damage coming out from up top. The Dynamite, there's too much damage. Also pulls out the Bob. That might just be ever so slightly too much. This is a fair bit of an investment here.
Ooh. Yeah, I don't think we can accuse them of being like cupidity with their ultimates here, because honestly, that was a very much an overinvestment from the DPS ultimates there. They were not necessary. Unfortunately, you can't really take that back. You can't say, oh, replay the fight and not use them. No, they've used them now, and that means this ultimate economy is far more even than it maybe should have been. Apples will be very close to theirs. It's only Halcyon that still has that application matrix, and everything else is really offline.
As the Mosstroopers are coming in back, a nice wall to a zone of Wolfmat, but the follow-up is not really there. A nice anti-nade, however, finds 2. Battlefield keeping everyone alive. Zusa loses that mech, however. So you're not going to be able to deny a lot of damage for your main tank, and especially with that Discord Orb, that's going to be a lot of damage coming on out. Apples drops during the high noon, and there's going to be a wall to just deny any sort of follow-up coming on through, as the Mosstroopers are kind of scrambling to get something together at the moment.
Yeah, Nut's been drying problematically early. Sousa as well, not getting as much value as they were in the previous maps. And I think the reason why they swapped to D.Va is to be able to deal with that Ashe a bit better, get onto that high ground, eat the dynamites. But it's not really working out so far. So if Sousa can increase that value from the D.Va, there might be a very good opportunity for them to get through this. But they do need to really deal with that Ashe.
Ashe indeed still being able to do so much damage. Coach has the Graviton Surge right at the ready. Blizzard comes on out. It's a counter Graviton to kind of deal with it, but everyone's frozen up. But with the Sandbear, that's a lot of damage coming on through. coach has already gotten taken out as the Transcendence ends with the 2 picks in favor of the Mosstroopers. This will be the payload moving on forward even further. It's 40 seconds on the clock, but it looks like the Mosstroopers will be able to capture the 2nd checkpoint. And they're going to be moving into the final stretch of King's Row.
2 minutes to go. Not a lot of ultimates. Actually, no ultimates whatsoever. Maybe self-destruct soon. And once again, Halcyon close to that location matrix. Phoenix will have that high noon. The only question is, will they be able to actually get the value out of those things?
Chonky Bois coming back for the recontest. Wolfman's just kind of swinging away. Phoenix is going to get denied the high noon. However, Zusa is going to lose the mech. Lever Bomb comes on out, doesn't find any kills here, as Not is just going all the way into the backline of the enemy team, picks up Goose along with them, but that's just 1 kill for a Reinhardt. That's not going to be enough, so Phoenix will be able to clean this up, and Chonky Bois holding on to the point. A minute left.
I do like the name Nut as well, because it can go 2 ways, right? Either your play is just nuts, or you're a nutty player. And I think at this point, Nut is looking to be a bit nuts most of the time. Like, those charges are very aggressive, goes in very aggressively without a lot of support quite often. Now that Zeus is back on the Zarya, they will have a bubble to play around with, so that might help their aggressive playstyle a bit.
Shatter is up, so the mind game's coming through. The wall is there. This is the point where you would want to charge, but the charge doesn't come on through. It is a very safe play, but the shatter does land, but there is a high noon at the ready, the stun as well. And no, the Chonky Boys will get all of the kills. Bob at the ready to clean this one up for X9. 27 seconds on the clock. Mosstroopers have got a lot of tools, but they're gonna have to get to the point fast, Classy.
And that's not even... That's something you really don't see a lot. It was actually the Bob from X9N that stopped the charge from coming through, and that's floored Nut. And that's just beautiful play. There will be a nano and a sound barrier, so a lot of sustain. Even the DPS ultimate's online now for Mosstroopers, and they can do a lot of damage if they manage to just jump down and get this value with the Reaper ultimate, for instance.
Well, it's the Blizzard that opens this one up, and there's already 2 kills in favor of the Mosstroopers. They've used 3 ultimates. Apples still has the Death Blossom to try and clear this final fight out, to just get those extra few picks. Trying to get this.
I really like the way they held on to the Death Blossom as well, because they jumped down in the middle of the enemy team when there was like a blizzard going on as well, so they could have just pulled the trigger, but it just wasn't necessary, and they realized that.
Halcyon already used the Immortality Field, so that's all the damage coming on through, and the Mosstroopers, even in overtime, will still manage to get the full push.
Well done. It's we almost missed the last fight so quick, that was over so quickly. They tried to jump in. They actually got some value. They got a charge kill, and then 1 or 2, like a lot of damage chunked down, but then Apples just jumps in with their Death Blossom and takes out 3 or 4 together with their team, and that just means it's over. Card gets to the end, but it's in overtime, and that's a good place to start, because if you're going to be able to complete the map with over a minute, you will definitely not be able to lose the map, and that's the position that you want to be in.
It's gonna be up to the Chonky Boys to get that bigger time bank going as we wait out what these teams want to be running. And I mean, this May from Veneri on defense especially, that is going to be a troublesome one to have to deal with for the attacking team.
And I like the defensive setup here. I would have preferred to see the Ashe. I think the Ashe from Apples is just more... It's just going to work better. But I think the reason why they're going for the McCree is because the stun war on the Reinhardts has been going mad. Like, Nut has been stunned a fair few times. And I think they want to do the same thing to Wolfmad in order to deny them the value from the Reinhardt that they want to get. I do like the setup potentially with this Moira, though. If you're going to go in with the hard brawl, why not use that Moira? Because she just provides more AoE healing for your team rather than that single target longer duration sustain that Diana provides.
The attack comes in from the Chonky Boys. Very aggressive, very speedy going on through. However, Wolfmad already drops down, and so does Phoenix. So your very aggressive push just gets denied by the Mosstroopers, who just get ever so slightly more sustained, just manage to rotate appropriately and pick up a few kills of their own.
Yeah, and that's where the stun from the McCree immediately came in. They just stunned up a target, and they were able to stop the push, like the coherent push coming in, by just stunning one target. Because if You stun the Reinhardt, the front line is completely like, oh, we were expecting to have a shield here or someone swinging, and it's not happening. So you're missing either damage or protection just because of that stun. And that means you get a lot of capitalization, putting the rush on the back foot.
Mosstroopers doing very well on the rotation. X9 pushed back as the Chonky Boys have the setup on point, but once again, Wolfmat down. However, Dynamite in the back line is putting Apples quite low here, as well as Veneri. So much damage coming on through from that Ashe ability. The wall just to keep everyone safe for ever so slightly longer. Potentially trying to get the recontest, but as the rest of the Mosstroopers fall, that recontest is going to be impossible.
Yeah, this is not going to go well here as a recontest effort, but they will be able to obviously defend more in streets. They have quite a few ultimates coming up soon, so if they manage to get a few early picks here, they could potentially go for the chokehold, go for the archway, and that's a position where you do not want to get held in when you are on the Chonky Boy side.
Troopers are gonna have to regroup and set up somewhere, but Chonky Boy's indeed taking a very nice forward positioning here as well. Dynamite once again coming on through, does not really connect as the Bob will come in, but gets denied by the wall. So another wall to just deny a lot of that value. However, the Mosstroopers are forced back ever so slightly, Glass.
It's looking like these ultimates they're having on the defense are going to be held for a bit longer. The High Noon does come out here, but they're waiting for an engage to actually happen. They're not making their own move, and they might have to go aggressive. That's a shatter, though.
That's a shatter. Only puts Coach on the floor. The charge in as well, but that's a counter shatter that puts a few more on the floor. However, with that sound barrier right, ready, and up, there's not enough follow-up to get the kills. Not though Dude does get a few kills of their own, and this is where Mosstroopers starts pulling it back. 3 minutes and 50 seconds on the clock, so still a fair bit to go as they try to just deny the Lucio, but they will not pick up the kill there.
They don't actually opt to go for the full spawn hold strategy. They're just going for the archway. And I think that's still a nice strategy to go with. The archway is very very holdable, but the attack here from Chonky Boys is going to come through the side, through the flank, and that's why it's a good thing they're holding in the bookstore. Otherwise, they might not have seen that coming.
Mosstroopers indeed pulling back just ever so slightly. Coach just throwing in that Graviton surge along with the Blizzard, getting a nice snowball of death coming on through as not drops Wolfmat as well, though Apple's trying to bring this back in equal trade. Both of the tanks of the Chonky Boys down, but as the rest of the damage comes on through, that will be the Chonky Boys moving forward just ever so slightly more.
It's looking like this is going to be a pretty good time going into C. I don't think another contest will be able to come out. I think they're too far away with too many members. And I don't think Nut is going to be as nuts to just charge in there. It's not going to happen. So this third point is going to get unlocked. 4 minutes and 10 seconds. And with the ultimates that are still in the bank, it could be a fairly even fight the next one. But King's Row so far definitely shaping up to be in the favor of the Chonky Boys.
Might be where the reverse sweep starts, as the Mosstroopers are going to be going forward. Not just throws in the shatter, doesn't find anything. The shatter does still have the nano at the ready to provide some pressure power, but no, that does not come in time to keep Nut alive. So once again, you're losing out on your main tank. Zusa is just trying to get a mega health back. He's now away from the team. Zoned off, is going to get burnt down as Hashdash, the main support, is also not going to be able to put out any sort of nano boost. And the Chonky Boys just very aggressively and very convincingly moving on forward as just the picks are coming one by one. Another Blizzard from Phoenix is just going to secure the rest of this point, as they're going to be securing a few more kills. Shatter, everyone on the floor. Wolfmat showing not how it's done, as the Mosstroopers don't have anyone really left to try and get this hold going. And this is going to be a hefty time bank for the Chonky Boys. 3 minutes on the clock that they managed to get a very clean full push with.
Yeah, you thought this was going to be over. Well, not by a long shot. You'll have to do better to get this 3-0 victory. And the 3-0 victory cannot even happen anymore. I think, well, technically it can still, because they can get a draw and then a map win. But the draw is going to be a heroic to pull out. 3 minutes to attack. Last time they held for about a minute. So, it's going to be tough. But maybe they'll make some compositional swaps that work out better on the side of Mosstroopers, and they can actually hold for 3 minutes. It's definitely possible. It's not something that I will count out as a possibility. But what they'll actually have to do, I'm not entirely sure. I think a lot of the time, X9N was just getting so much value from that Ashe. And if you're not going to play the Ashe yourself, you really need something more to deal with that and to deal with the follow up that the Ashe was getting. So now we do see Apples going to the Ashe themselves. They're going with the double barrier as well because the Reinhardt matchup is just not working out, simply put. And Vinery back onto the Echo. They're going for something that was actually just destroying Chonky Boys earlier on the last map, and I like it. I really think that this is a very good way to go. I said before that I would have liked the Ashe pick instead of the McCree pick, and I'm going for it off the bat. It just makes sense to me.
I would definitely agree. The Mosstroopers indeed are going for this high ground defense, but they're gonna have to hold for 3 minutes for just the 1 tick, and the Chunky Boys are gonna be able to just kind of play around this point. Definitely not going to be an easy fight as the wall already comes down. Apples is gonna come from high ground. It's not really in a position where he wants to be in, as Veneri will be the first to drop. Apples goes down as well. No DPS means no pressure, and the Chunky Boys just going forward. Mosstroopers falling apart as Wolfman takes not for a ride into the spawn by force as the rest of the Mosstroopers is go down. Chonky Boys will put up 1 point on the scoreboard for their side, saying we are down, but we are definitely not out.
No, it's a 2-1 scoreline still. It's gonna be still an uphill battle. Of course, they haven't won the series just yet, but they might have started what could be a reverse sweep. Not in that last blade is going down. That was the one where we thought, oh, that was an ambitious charge. But yeah, going into the 2 CP maps, I'm not sure who I'd give the edge. I think a lot of it will depend on the early setup and the map that they go to. Of course, it will be the pick of the Mosstroopers. And they go for Hanamura, which, judging from their composition so far, I like Hanamura best for them. I think that is a very solid map to go to. Ashe can work really well there. He can play the double barrier. The Echo can do the work that she needs to do by just getting into the point and around the point on the outside. And even when you go to point B, where it's more enclosed, you can still get away with playing these type of heroes. So Chunky Boys will still have a monumental task ahead of them if they want to reverse sweep the series. But at least they got a point on the board. It's not a complete stomp, at least.
It's not a complete lockout, indeed. Veneri also on the May that we've seen on King's Row. Definitely a strong pick on Hanamura as well. Very much as soon as you go into second point, a difficult hero to kind of break through. So Chonky Boys indeed are gonna have to get an interesting composition, and I'm wondering whether we're still gonna be seeing an organized team play the Symmetra Straska map.
It's possible. Like, again, it's hard to count these things out where you're like, oh,
Mhm.
will they, won't they? But I mean, I think you could. I think it's definitely possible. But and I also don't know if either of these teams are really prepared for something like that, where it will just catch them off guard. Um, you know what? I would like to see it. If they do it, I think it has a very uh, large possibility to actually work out and catch the other team off guard. I think we're in a position where it can be unexpected enough that I would almost want them to try it. But you can go for the comfort, you can go for things you're used to, or you can try something experimental. I think if anyone's gonna try it, might be the Chunky Boys. I think Mosstroopers are just they're still the ones that need to be beat, and Chunky Boys have to try and find a way to beat them still.
And I mean, one way to definitely do it is to just kind of catch the enemy team off guard. So you might be able
Yeah.
to get away with it, but it's always the question in these very coordinated environments because you can really react very quickly to it. So you essentially just really have the one chance most of the time.
Very much
Um,
so.
but yeah, it's gonna be Hanamura next. Chunky Boys on their defense first. It's gonna be
Yeah.
Mosstroopers trying to get the full push through both of the points.
Yeah, and Hanamura, it's the reason why Hanamura is such a great map to me is because while you do have these more choke point type ways of getting into the objective area. Once you're in the objective area, there are so many different elements to it. There's high grounds on either side. The point can be either enclosed, and the second point is more open, but then the high grounds really matter. And then you still have a lot of obstacles in and around the objective you can use to get cover or use to back off. And there's the health packs in fun position. So I do think that Hanamura has a very balanced and interesting geometry when it comes to that, as long as you're able to get into the objective area rather than trying to get through the gate, so to speak. Because once you're through, that's when the fight sort of really starts.
I mean, that's kind of also the challenge on, especially that second point, getting to the point
Yes.
is
Yes.
usually the biggest
Very
challenge
much.
of most of these games on Hanamura. First
Yeah.
point, the first initial choke the gate, definitely a difficult one, but as soon as you break through that and get to fight on the courtyard, that really changes around the whole atmosphere of these games.
Yeah, and of course, we see these beautiful dragons on the temple of Hanamura itself. Into the dojo. See the remnants of the old brotherly battle, but we will see the defense come out here with that double barrier, with that Ash, and with the Mei. So that was working for them on King's Row. I think they're just going to continue that. Wolfman and Coach now, of course, on different tanks. But I do think if you're going to hold a choke here, the double barrier is almost required. Otherwise, you're just not going to get through. And we might see the Symmetra strike come out here. Apples is definitely queuing up that hero. Hashdash going with the Baptiste, and they do go for that. They want to try and use a wall on main in order to keep the teleporters safe or to wall them from getting on the objective. And I don't think they're ready. They're not going to be ready for a teleporter strat. Everyone gets through, and now what are you going to do? Oh, nuts! The barrier wasn't able to keep you alive.
Gonna take out Nuts, so that is one player already out, and one of the players did not manage to make it through. Now I've got X9 on the high ground, being able to just get those shots on through. You're gonna have to hit the Symmetra to really get your value. And the Symmetra is just kind of beaming down those shields, so your double barrier composition is gonna really be in a fair bit of trouble. Apples finally drops his X9, manages to connect those shots in the end. 1 tick has been given up, but now the Chonky boys will be fully aware of the Symmetra strategy coming on through. It's not going to be an easy task to try to keep on doing this over and over again.
Yeah, and it wasn't as clear cut, right? Like, if Nut doesn't go down there, it is not even that big of a problem that the Hashdash didn't make it through, because I think Hashdash was the one that didn't make it on the Baptiste. So they were just still healing from main. But they can do that. They can just heal from a distance. They don't need to be on the objective. It's just the immortality field and all these abilities and even the healing are a little bit easier to get off on close range. Now they will switch over to this Echo on Vinery. Apples will still be on the Symmetra. They're gonna try and do it again because Apples almost has that ultimate. You want to use that wall or teleport to the high ground this time around, which is a very nice strat that you see happen sometimes when the mid strat doesn't work, or as an initial surprise.
Blizzard actually comes in from Phoenix. That's going to freeze up a few members of Mosstroopers with a bit of damage coming on through. That will be all of the kills in favor of the Chonky boys. The Mosstroopers, after looking quite strong early on in these matchups, are kind of falling apart at the moment.
Yeah, you wanted to go for the strat. The strat's not working, and you're still sticking to the strat. I mean, now you have the Symmetra wall. And you'll have quite a few ultimates of your own. The self-destruct's almost up. You'll basically have both support ultimates. And you don't have to fight into any DPS ultimates and half the tank ultimates this time around. Teleporter's going to come in again. They're trying to do the same high ground strat. Everyone gets in this time around. And it will be a straight assault onto the Ashe by the Echo and the D.Va combo.
As the Symmetra wall comes on through, the contest is now once again there. Mosstroopers pushing on forward. Amplification Matrix gets dropped. But Apples is going to be able to just keep burning down these shields now. A fully charged Symmetra not does charge Wolfman off of the map actually, but losing that main tank is really going to give you a rough fight. And once again, the Chonky boys just coming out on top. Mosstroopers are really going to have to rethink what you're putting out here to have a chance of getting this team fight.
They're not able to get on X9N. X9N is doing way too much damage in these fights. They're not able to get on top of them in order to deny them that value. They have gotten 38.8%, so they haven't gotten nothing, which means that if they'd managed their own full hold, even if they don't cap this point, they might still be able to win out the map. But you want to get a bit more. Apple's now on the Tracer. I don't know if that's the answer, but I do think that if they all make a combined effort to get X9N here, they might be able to get away with that. Doesn't turn out to be true, and it's Vinery going down early.
just 30 seconds on the clock. That is not what you need to have happen, especially seeing as the duplicate was right at the ready. Chonky Boys, so many tools to still hold on to this point. You're gonna have to fight through a Blizzard, through a Bob, through a Supercharger, and a Gravitic Flux. Mosstroopers have got an uphill battle and a half as Venery finally gets back for the next fight, but Apples this time drops early. Gonna be a duplicate as essentially the only tool right at the ready. Yaren drops the sound barrier, but the Blizzard, along with all of that damage coming on through, is going to make it too difficult for the Mosstroopers to even get a foothold on this point, and this will not be a successful push here for the team in red. The Chonky Boys will hold on to point A and get a very successful defense going for them, and a very solid chance to get another point on the board.
And it's really all about that value that Apples and Vinery are not able to find as opposed to Phoenix and X9N. X9N especially, just the pocket of Goose just denied all the attempts to take their life, and they usually actually won the duel against it. Diva got out of the mech before they even got to them most of the time. The Zusa not showing up, as we're sort of used to them at this point, by this point. And while this could be a very good defense, so there's a very good possibility that they just set up and full hold, like we just saw happen. I do see a good future here for Mosstroopers. It's going to be very hard to do so. On the other hand, though, we just saw it happen. It is actually a full hold, so all you need to do is not let it get past 38.8%. That sounds easier said than done, but what we just saw, I very much in favor of the possibility of that happening. And with this defensive lineup, it can definitely happen. Apple's Finery on that Ash Torbjorn, a lot of spam damage that you need to get through before you get close to the objective. The Nut and Zusa, very sustainable with a double barrier. Hashtash and Yaren, getting a lot of extra spam damage and extra spam damage potential out with a Discord Orb and extra damage that Baptiste and Zenyatta both do. Yeah, this is very much they're gonna obviously set up on this wooden deck, just let them walk through main, which is fine. And then the Torbjorn and the Ash can have a much longer period to do something before the enemy team gets on their tanks.
If Phoenix does indeed come out with the Sombra, and that could really be a wrench in the plan of the defense. I mean, if you get that EMP up, that could just completely break it apart. It's essentially the only real thing that you need to break up. Apples, though, gets that early pick onto Wolfnat, who just tried to go for the early charge. And indeed, the Mosstroopers picking up a few kills of their own.
This is going to be what's going to keep happening. Like, they're just going to spam the main choke. And what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to get past that? There's an Ash spamming at you, a Torbjorn spamming at you, both tanks spamming at you. They have Halt Accretion, they have a Zenyatta, they have a Baptiste. They have so much spam going into that choke that if you're not going to be able to get through that, I mean, how are you ever going to get to the objective? You kind of need this double barrier almost, because Wolfmat's shield just doesn't exist.
X9 putting a fair bit of damage down onto the shields of the defense, though even jumping up means that you're still getting some damage from the turret. And indeed, these shields just too much to really try and break through. However, the rotation is there. Coach has got a very high charge Zarya on his hands.
Makes sense.
But,
you know,
now indeed on this high ground.
But now they have to make another speed boost move towards the objective, or towards their next objective, and the Ash is still in main. X9N very low, will probably burn out here. So they're already numbers down, and there the Molten Core just completely annihilates the Chonky Boys here. They get chunked down, as we say.
There's so much damage coming on out, and Veneri at a perfect position to just deny that rotation. That's already 2 fights denied. We're down to 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and Phoenix is swapped off of the Sombra onto the Mei. So now indeed a different fight.
Ooh.
However, Yaren drops. Main healer is down. X9 has got that one now out of the fight.
That's such a shame, because that's really the one that you're relying on for most of your healing. The Transcendence is almost ready. Maybe they can use that to sustain the fight, but you see the immediate rush coming in. Apple's already down. Medwolf charged in there, and this is going to be over before it even begins.
With that one pick, the Mosstroopers had such a deficit for this fight, and the Chonky Boys realized it, saw the green light, saw the opportunity, rushed in, got the point, and is looking for the reverse sweep.
And imagine if that pick doesn't go off. Like, imagine if you don't get that kill on the Zenyatta.
what are you really in a position to do there? Because you didn't really have a lot of ultimates ready. The Transcendence was almost up as well for the Zenyatta and the Amplification Matrix. They were in such a good position to hold out for at least one or two more fights, and then all of a sudden you just lose Yaren. And I mean, I would almost say, give me the replay code so I can look at how Yaren died, because Yaren really should not have died there. That was just,
No.
I still don't really believe that it happened, but somehow it just happens. And looks like we're gonna go to Oasis next to close out the series. Oasis, the map it's gonna be decided on. We're in a 2-2. Will we see the reverse sweep, or will Mosstroopers get back on the horse and deny the momentum that Chonky Boys have given themselves with this?
I mean, that is obviously the question. This is going to be everything on the line and how it's been going so far. It's kind of feeling like it might be a 99 to 99 situation here on Oasis as well. A very close series that we've got on our hands here in this intermediate series, and a very good game between these two teams. And it's just those tiny mistakes and errors that can really break everything apart. And that's unfortunately where the Mosstroopers at that
Yeah.
point just kind of dropped. And they're gonna have to pick this back up to have a chance to get their own victory, which they started off so well.
Yeah, they started off great. They looked like they were going to be able to be beaten actually by Chunky Boys, but all of a sudden, Mosstroopers just the code's been cracked. I think a
Mm-hmm.
big part of it is Phoenix and X9N actually getting a lot of value all of a sudden, as opposed to the earlier maps. And as long as DPS start getting the value and start hitting their shots finally, especially on that Ash that X9N is now playing, there's not a lot you can do against that aside from like hitting the shots better.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Yaren getting picked off there. A lot of that also has to do with positioning and is a shield down or not, and are you ready for that? Are you expecting it? And I guess not. So going into Oasis, going to be more chaotic. We saw how well Mosstroopers were able to just thrive in that chaos of control and just take the point away from the other team. And I think we're going to be ready to just go into this map and see where it's going to be at. And I'm really I don't know. I'm really, really, really curious which point we're gonna get first, because it's gonna decide so much about what this map's gonna look like. And Oasis is the dive control map. This is where you can play most dive of all
Mm-hmm.
the control maps still to this day. So if they're gonna get, for instance, City Center and Garden first, Mosstroopers has a very big edge. But on the other hand, if they get University and then Gardens, there's a good chance that Chunky Boys is going to have a more of a lead and more of can keep their momentum rolling. So a lot of this will depend on which map do you get first, and are you going to pick the composition that's going to be able to deal with that?
I mean, it is very much also a mental game that gets mentioned very often in these casting moments. If you start losing life from Mosstroopers at this point, you gotta gather yourself back up. You've had those first two wins, you're feeling good, and suddenly you lose a map. Well, that happens, but
Yeah,
then you lose
that
another one
happens. You know,
pretty dominantly. And then at that point, you gotta make sure that the team sticks together, that at that point, you keep that mental going and you keep
yeah,
you get back into the game of like, well, okay, we lost two maps, we still can do this, this is still going to be our
yeah,
map, this is what we can do. And you need to make sure that you do not get into that back mindset. And as you indeed mentioned, if Chunky Boys just get that initial map, that can really put a strain on the focus and the team play that you might get. That is really an
yeah.
important deal of all these coordinated teams.
And of course, if you lose one map, you can still account to, oh, we're just throwing, something like
Yeah.
that. And then all of a sudden, they're gone back to a 2-2, which you had no chance of winning, apparently. And you're going to be in a hard, it's going to be a hard ask for you to really pull it back. But now that we're going to Oasis, starting on City Center, this should be a comfortable map to play on if you are the Mosstroopers. You could play dive here. You don't have to. You could play dive here. And I think it's a good chance that they might. They might go back to that Rialto composition, which they were looking really good on that. Like the coordination between the Echo and then the dive play, and they had the other DPS next to it. The supports were lining up correctly around the objective. It's of course a very different map type and a very different map geometry that we have here. The flanks are going to be more apparent, but it could still be possible. It does look though that both of these teams are not looking to go anything divey, although Not is queuing up the wrecking ball. We're just going to wait for a bit because obviously they're debating us right now.
Well, that is usually indeed the thing for these maps, as we get a poster for a movie of Diva in a screen. But we're going to be waiting out what these teams will be playing, and indeed the swaps come on out. Double hit scan for Mosstroopers and a double barrier, but a Rhine Sigma double barrier, interestingly enough.
Yeah. They have more mobile DPS though. Like if you look at the double barrier that they're running on the Chonky Boys side, it's going to be an Ashe and a Torbjorn. Where yes, Ashe is more mobile, but she wants to stay at range, and Torbjorn doesn't really walk a lot around. They do get that opening kill on the Goose, and that's almost all the healing gone. So amazing.
Just a fire strike snipe coming on through from Nut, taking out that main support out of the way. However, Halcyon also being able to pump out a lot of healing for the team, but still, this is a very good opener for the Mosstroopers. This X9 also drops, and the Chonky Boys are now in the low ground, where especially as a Reinhardt really wants to be fighting, to be able to swing that hammer into the enemy team, not just really wanting to grab those kills, charges on through, denying that space, and this will be the Mosstroopers picking up the point first.
Yeah, it's a good start for them. Of course, they have to feel a bit confident again about their abilities. I think this will really help them do it. Good ultimate charge coming up as well, ready from the DPS, from Zusa as well, and nothing much besides that amplification matrix. And Phoenix just back over to that Mei. That Mei has just been chunking them down on the side of Mosstroopers, so need to be careful to not die to those headshots anymore, and the wall can be detrimental.
Well, a very dangerous ability to really have to play around, especially as the Reinhardt player. Indeed, as you mentioned, Apples, Veneri both coming up to those DPS ultimates. Zusa as well, close to the Gravitic Flux. So Apple will get the High Noon coming on out, already in a position where he can use it. Amplification Matrix is up, but the High Noon will be there. That is a whole bunch of damage, but the Immortality Field will deny the death. Phoenix will not deny the death on Apples, as now actually the Visor comes in through the backline. Wall is going to deny any sort of space, and a lot of damage is denied by sheer just positioning. Nice use of wall.
Good job's been done though.
But the damage is indeed been done. Wolfman, Goose, X9, all three down. And even with that and no real value of those initial ultimates, Mosstroopers still hold on, and that was a hefty long fight. 75% of the counter.
The legs did what they needed to do. They ran around the back. Then they used the ultimate to distract half the team. The wall, the immortality field, so much was used to deny that visor value. And then everyone's turned around to the soldier. And the rest of the front line of Mosstroopers just walks in and gets the kills. Now 90% last fight territory and no real let up.
Gravitic Flux comes on out. It pulls a few people up, but puts the immortality field down. As the amplification matrix comes on out, Veneri actually going very aggressively and just kind of dodging shots here. Just the legs too difficult. As Phoenix actually gets the nano, the charge gets denied as the freeze comes through, but Veneri in the backline, two rockets are just going to provide so much damage. Blizzard is on the floor, but everyone from the Chonky Boys is just dropping left, right, and center, and the Mosstroopers with 100-0, looking as strong as they were at the start.
Don't sleep on the legs. That's definitely the story of that round. What a play from Veneri. And even though we're in the backline, right? You saw them battling the Ashe of X9N, and X9N is just like, I'm gonna try to hit you, but you're just gonna keep walking around and running around in circles, and I just won't be able because your hitbox is gonna be very annoying to deal with. So yeah, Veneri just playing that to a T, and I think they're just gonna stick on this composition and say, like, you know what, it ain't broke, let's not fix it.
I mean, even X9 is kind of shaking the mouse of like, I need to get my... I need to get these shots. Stop trying to just hit the soldier and hit those shots. But indeed, not that many swaps. Chonky Boys still in the Mei. Having the Brigitte and the Anna as well. This can be a hefty fight here on University, Classy.
Yeah, it's almost like Soldier doesn't want to get hit, you know? That's what happened there. Yeah, it's time. This could be the last point we see, and already a very aggressive stance here for... Oh, Mosstroopers, but Wolfman does more aggressive move, gets the charge, and the wall is out!
Talk about an aggressive play. Wolfman just charges in, both of the Reinhardts getting value. However, the Chonky Boys getting that higher value. The Freeze does not manage to really pick up the supports just yet, but Yaren is still actually going to get out with their life.
Yeah, pretty mobile hero, that Baptiste sometimes. You know, can just jump away from any form of danger. And going into this next fight, I mean, not really any ultimates online. It was a very quick one. Closest one is going to be Hashtash with that Amplification Matrix, which could just get a one-shot on a Squishy. And Binary back on the soldier gets the kill on the X9. X9 is going to be a bit frustrated by that one at this point, because that's like the second time that happened.
Has locked the legs and getting the high ground, pumping out so much damage as the rest of the Mosstroopers now coming on through, getting the green light after that initial kill and taking a nice position on the point. Only about a 28% given up.
X9 trying to go for the less hittable target, but Binary almost takes out themselves with those Helix rockets on the side. Beautiful Blizzard coming out. Almost everyone going to be frozen up. That Immortality Field won't save you from that one.
And no Diva to really deal with it, and Azusa did not manage to eat that one with the kinetic grasp, so that will indeed be the Chonky Boys just coming straight on back. This is a big back and forth here between these two teams.
And now we're going to be seeing the Visor flank attempt likely coming out again from Binary. Nuts ready with the Shatter. Hashtash still the Amplification Matrix, and close to the rally is Yaren. But support ultimates and tank ultimates are going to be ready on the other side. So a lot to work around with, and a lot to work around as well. Are you going to get swallowed up by that Graviton?
Indeed, the Chonky Boys in a very good defensive position. Amplification Matrix comes out, however, the wall will deny a lot of the value. The legs on the high ground with the tactical visor. Does manage to distract X9 a bit as the Tracer takes a bit of damage with barely any health left. Is forced to just take a health pack at the moment. Shatter drops, but no follow-up, so no kills. Wall is now also down as Phoenix is just trying to pump out damage. Mortality Field very clutch there to keep everyone alive as Apples just is running amok in the back line. X9 has won the fight versus the soldier, however, this might already be done as Not just takes out Phoenix with a nice charge, and the Mosstroopers will bring this fight on back though. X9 with a clutch pulse.
I mean, it's not going to bring the fight back, but Hashtash will be out, so if they can re-engage quickly, they could potentially get some advantage here. You already see the defensive setup here. They don't want to get too close. They want to give Hashtash as much time as possible to come back here. Apples will have the Death Blossom. The Blizzard is ready again. Such a quick charge here from Phoenix. Now already goes the long-range Blizzard once again. Will only hit the Brigitte potentially, but I think everyone gets out of it.
But that does very much zone the rest of the team out. However, Mosstroopers though gets Wolf Mat, and as the kills are coming in, there's no shield to deny the Shatter. However, Halcyon is still being able to get some damage done on the Brigitte, but Nut says no, this hammer is gonna be bigger and gonna be doing more damage. Amplification Matrix comes down, but there's nobody really there to be able to use it. Well, Zusa still managed to get some damage done. Apple's also picking up a coach, and the Mosstroopers are still holding on to this point.
Oh, Vinary, the one shot was missed by Goose, and that's why the healing didn't come in for X9 in time. Wolfmat also falling. That was a clutch play, and once again, these immortality fields from Hashtash have been so good. They now swapped over to Lucio in order to get back in the fight quickly, to speed boost recontest, and now Apples is setting up for the Death Blossom. It's going to happen, and I think they know. The Chonky Boys know it's there, but do they know where he's hiding? I don't think they do.
Very much looking at they don't know. He does shoot once, uses the Wraith Form, actually goes out, doesn't go for the Death Blossom just yet. He's gonna reposition. Rally comes in now, Gravitic Flux as well. Now, once again, going into that backline. A fair bit of damage done. Halcyon already drops, and now it is the Death Blossom. 1, 2, 3. Will there be a fourth? It doesn't matter. This is the cleanup. Apples manages to clutch it out. Some great team play. Mosstroopers pick up the second point, which is the final point and the final map that they need to win this whole series versus the Chonky Boys. And what a massive fight to end it out on.
Yeah, that was honestly, it was just beautifully played. So you did see, oh, Yaren gets to play as a Brigitte. Probably just a lot of smacking.
Just hold left.
There we go. and some healing on the soldier. Yeah, great play. But like a lot of that. This just comes down to such great immortality fields from Hashtash. Like Hashtash, I would say it was just the MVP, especially off that map, and maybe even of the series, because they've been doing so much work on all their support so far. Like Hashtash, if I'm gonna give it to anyone on Mosstroopers, yes, DPS take rate. Yeah, we saw some good tank play coming out, but I don't think Hashtash has been feeding at any point in time. The only questionable play they made was that like control the exaboot jump at the end where they got pulsed, because of course you're much less mobile when you're doing the control jump. But that's the only time where I sort of felt they were questionable. So I really would like to shout out Hashtash as a result of that. Great match though, 3-2, much closer than we expected after the first two maps. I do think the Chunky Boys can be happy about that. It's a shame they lost in the end, but at least they put up a great fight.
This was a very good fight and indeed a very close series. GG's to both of the teams. And with that, indeed, that was the EU series for today. That does not mean that Get Good is done for today. That there is also still
Not.
NA Get Good to go later on. That will be in the intermediate and the rookie division. And there will be a lot of great talent bringing that coverage to you. But for now, at the very least, this will be Get Good done for a Man of Class and myself. So thank you very much for joining.
Yeah.
We hope you had a wonderful time. So make sure to tune in later for Get Good NA. Make sure to tune in next week for more Overwatch goodness here from EloHL Esports. We hope you have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time.